Welcome to this edition of Read Woke with the Cedar Rapids Public Library. It is with pleasure that I introduce Caleb Rainey, the Negro Artist, poet, performer, and producer.
I don't remember the first time I was called nigger, but I remember the first time I wasn't. I'm 15, new to high school, not sure who I'm gonna be or what people see when they look at me. So I search and find a guy who seems to have all the answers I could copy from. Brad. A white boy with hair on fire, and I couldn't help but admire his confidence. He stood so tall and strong, and I felt so small. So when he talks to me in the parking lot after school, I'm desperate to play it cool. He talks to me about the soccer team, and I ask him how he got so good, but before he could answer, a car drives by. Obviously from the hood. Trap rattling a pack of black boys in the back, and Brad sighs, rolls his eyes, and says to me, "Man, I hate niggers. Good thing you're not one of them." And I wonder then what I have been. Am I a nigger? See, I wasn't born by the river in a little tent, but I shot my first gun there with my uncle who spent plenty of time in the pen. And my granny never passed the 8th grade, but she could cook up collard greens and fry up chicken like she had a culinary degree. And my granddad, well, he's a dishwasher, but he could still toss you in spades or tunk like you were a little pumpkin. I played chess with my great uncle, who's been in and out of rehab and tells me all about the life he's had. And I know it's sad, but not all my cousins know their dads. And some of my cousins fight their fears with fists because they're too hard for tears. And some of my cousins yell and can't spell and have seen the inside of a cell, but when they see me, they always wish me well. And some of my cousins made it out to Cali or elsewhere, and I swear God's there. Even with nappy hair and sagging skinny jeans, they always seem to find a way to make ends meet. And all my cousins and I rap along to the songs in the car. Too loud. And now I find myself wondering what that makes me. Am I a nigger? See, Brad wasn't the first white man to see my tan and assume he knew my hand. I remember coming home from a school event. The day was spent, but a cop made me stop. Asked what was I doing out so late, and I didn't see any hate, but I knew it was at stake, so I apologized. Told him I'd get home soon. He said, "You better. Only criminals like the light of the moon." And that's when I knew he was afraid of the dark. I remember my junior high crush couldn't go to the dance with me because her father wouldn't take a chance with me. Said he'd heard about those black boys, and I guess the cops did too. Because what do they do but pull me over for no turn signal? Doesn't that sound a little fickle? Or pull me over for too sharp a turn? Doesn't that sound a little absurd? But their eyes tell no lies when they look at me and see less than. Like my math teacher, who kept me in during recess, told my parents I was dumb because I spent too much time talking to my classmates, erasing the division she creates rather than learning her lesson on how to subtract my presence. Because 0 equals black. And in fact, the cops taught me that. When a bullet hit a brother's back in front of my childhood home, and the cops showed up and they block off the whole zone like traffic cones but never move to help. Only kept us from ourselves, so that nigga died. And I can't lie. I'm afraid to walk at night. Because I just might learn the answer to the cancer that is inside my head. Am I a nigger? Thank you. My name is Caleb, the Negro Artist Rainey. I'm a spoken word performer and author. I have 2 books out, Look Black Boy and Heart Notes. And I was born and raised in Columbia, Missouri. So I was born in the Midwest that wanted to be the South. So a lot of my work tackles race relations and also a lot of romance and heartbreak and all of the things that make us human and how do we connect with one another. I like to say that I never thought I was going to be a poet, but that's even a little bit of a lie. I always knew I was going to be a writer. That I knew. I thought I would write novels, to be honest. I really thought I was going to be a fiction writer. But then at 16 in high school, this girl kind of comes up to me and she's like, hey, have you heard of this poetry thing? I think it's pretty cool. And I was like, I could do that. I know how to write. I can make that happen. And so I signed up for this poetry slam to impress this girl. And I take the stage and it works, which is great. But it was more powerful than I could have ever expected. I took the stage at 16 and realized how powerful it was to be vulnerable and open and heard, right? To have a space where your voice was completely respected. I took a stage and everyone was quiet. And so for me, poetry is constantly connected with spoken word. It is almost unable to divide the two, and that's not because I don't think that there is a difference, because there is. But for me, the experience of poetry is so connected to also voice, and so like I've never written a poem without speaking it, without knowing what it sounds like. I've almost never written a line without saying the line first, because I need to know how it feels. And I would actually suggest, if you're a writer, to check out, like, to read your own stuff out loud. It's so different. There's something powerful about making your poem into this immediate moment, right? There's this ownership when your voice takes it on. And also, like, on the technical terms, it's going to help you with rhythm. It's going to let you know, like, what's clunky and what's not. But really, it just adds this life to a poem that I think is really, really cool, at the simplest way to say it. It's just really cool. Also, I like to say that I wasn't going to be a poet, but even then, in my second book here, I have a direct quote. I published my first book when I was 24, and after that, I was going through old journals that I had written, because I've always been a writer. So I found this journal of me being 11, right? I'm 11 years old, and, you know, the handwriting's not great, the spelling is atrocious, and, like, it's not good. But I find this direct quote, and it just made me laugh so hard, because even at 11, I was kind of aware of who I was going to be. And so in one of my poems, I have this direct quote, which is, poetry is just another way to express our feelings, but more difficult. I think poetry is the most boring thing to write. But good poetry is not all that bad to read. I also think that when I'm older, most likely, I will write poetry. This is me at 11. So I want to tell you I started at 16, but then 11-year-old me was like, I'm probably going to do this thing. I don't know how that works for who I am. But I don't know if I ever would have been a poet if I hadn't taken it to the stage. I don't know if I would have really dedicated my life to this if it weren't for the fact that when I was on the stage and performing and sharing that poetry, I had the intimacy of an audience, right? The vulnerability and the openness and the tenderness that comes from poetry living in a moment that you're sharing with other people. And so another thing I want to share with you is like how I spread poetry now, right? What do I do now? Besides performing, which I've performed all around the nation, a little abroad, I also started a program called IC Speaks. And so it is a spoken word poetry program that exists in Iowa City, in which I go to the 4 different high schools in Iowa City. So that's City, Tate, Liberty, and West. And I go in there, or I guess pre-COVID, I would go physically in there. Now we virtually meet. And we would do writing workshops, generative stuff. Because I know that at 16, when I found the stage and wanted to keep doing that, I didn't feel like there was any place for me. Like I said, I was born in the Midwest that wanted to be the South. There weren't a lot of spaces that wanted black voices, that wanted a black boy that had a lot to say about what's going on, especially with race. And so I thought, now, in this point in my life, I want to create a space for 16-year-olds, for young people to have that power. Because at 16, you know things. You don't know everything. And there are plenty of things you're going to learn. But still, at 16, there are truths that you know. There are things about yourself that you know to be true. There are things about the world you know to be true. And so for me, I've been like, well, poetry is the space where you can play with those truths, own them, even manipulate them, and see what it is that you really believe, right? And to share them with people in a way that's so vulnerable and open that it can change people's hearts. And so not only do I perform and do some workshops with people, but I really, really try to give back to our high school age students. I also have met with some elementary schools and things like that. But it is really just me trying to make sure poetry is such a good vehicle to amplify voices. And so, like, if you're thinking about what does poetry have to do with now, right? We have COVID happening. We've got BLM stuff that happened in 2020 and is still happening today. And we have all of these other issues. How does poetry, how does art, how does writing have anything to do with that these days? It sometimes feels really small. And I'll tell you, I had the same issue. Like in 2020, I was like, what am I doing here? When the whole world seems to be burning, I want to write a poem. Does that seem like that's going to make a difference? But then I found, as I interrogated that thought, it does make a difference. Because the odds of me as one person changing a single policy that exists in our corrupt systems, or changing giant big things about the world, is pretty unlikely. Not impossible, but it is impossible to do by myself. But something that I can do individually is write a poem that speaks to you, that touches your heart in a way that makes you think differently about the world. Or if you are just learning what it means to be anti-racist, right? I can give a poem that gives you encouragement to keep growing there. Or the tools to interrogate your own privilege better, or any of those kinds of things. Poetry isn't going to change a policy. It's not. But it will change a person's heart. And that, even though it seems like such a small thing, people are the ones who make the policies, right? You change enough hearts, you'll change the policy. And so right now, I keep urging my writers and my artists to keep doing the work, even though it's tiring, even though we're dealing with trying to create art in a space where we aren't super supported because COVID made it harder, and we don't have our day jobs, and or we have to get different day jobs that aren't as helpful for our artistry. But we have to keep creating that art. It is essential to what it is that we need to do. If you want the world to be better, you've got to make art. It's simple as that. So thank you for listening to me kind of share some of my thoughts and my life with you. I want to end this whole little session with just one more poem. And so I would appreciate if you stick around just for this last one. This is actually created and inspired by a workshop that I did with my students, in which we were supposed to have a space to vent, to be like, oh, this is what I think of you, and for them, it's like people who walk slow in front of them, right? Or a teacher who's always on your nerves, or your parents, or whatever. And I never asked students to write something that I wouldn't write too. And so in that workshop, we were supposed to write about that. And so I'm sitting in this workshop, and I was thinking about the worst person I could think of, and what I could tell them, right? How could I tell them off? And then I ended up with this piece. What you need to hear. 1. You matter. I know some days you feel like a spider, a lone weaver sewing life together on your own, and some days you only catch crap. Or worse, nothing. So you go to bed wondering if your web is meant to be a coffin, if you're even meant to be a spider. But I need to tell you, wait until the morning dew. Wait until you see sunlight reflect off bulbs of water on strands you didn't even know were there. Those are the strands that connect us. that connect you to me. They're what holds us all together. We need them. We need you. So every night, look at your web and await the sunlight. 2, you have power. I know everything tells you you don't. The media, the police, the bosses, the teachers, the mirror, they say you can't control anything. Say that the history haunting you, or the system shackled around your ankles, or the trauma noose tight around your neck should direct your every step. I need to tell you, they're wrong. You can make each moment a rebellion. And I dare you dance, or you laugh at every chance. Trust in advance, smile at first glance. You can lift the weight of oppression by choosing connection. Thwart trauma with truth-telling. Shatter systems with sincerity. You can change the world. You simply have to fight. 3, we matter. Trade your mirror in for a window and see the beauty we all have to offer. 4, you are not finished. Who you are now is not who you will be. You are growing in God's garden among us, and in time we all bloom. In time we all bloom. And soon you will bloom brave. Petals soft and passionate, colors vibrant. You will be so spectacular, even God stops to smell. 5, I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Thank you.
Here are Caleb's 2 published collections of written poetry. Look, Black Boy, which won the 2021 North Street Book Prize for Poetry, and Heart Notes. I encourage you to visit Caleb's website, thenegroartist.com, for more spoken word poetry, updates on current projects, as well as to find out more about IC Speaks, a project Caleb facilitates in partnership with the Englert Theater and Iowa City Poetry, creating a safe, public space for young poets to experiment and express themselves. From his website, you can also find links to Caleb's social media. On Facebook, at The Negro Artist, Instagram, _Negro Artist, the same handle on Twitter, _Negro Artist, and on YouTube, subscribe to The Negro Artist. You can also stay up to date with all the happenings and workshops, not just the ones that Caleb is involved with, by looking up Iowa City Poetry, either online at their website, iowacitypoetry.com, or liking them on Facebook. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Read Woke. If you have any questions about the Read Woke Challenge or any questions about the library in general, please contact us at 319-261-READ or visit crlibrary.org. From all of us here at the Cedar Rapids Public Library, thanks for watching.